And welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation as usual as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
All right, here we go. What you think about, you will bring about.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome back to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I am your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm thrilled that you are able to join us today. If you liked our opening song, it's called Clarion Call by the Mark Arneson Band, and you can download that on any of your favorite music platforms. For those of you that are new to our show, Alzheimer Speaks is about sound information, not just sound bites. We like to have real conversations in a true talk radio format here. And so today we happen to be live. And so if you want to call in and ask any questions or make any comments, you can do that. We just ask that it's in a respectful, conversational manner that pertains to the topic we're talking about today, which is going to be about technology and reducing stress and increasing safety for those living with dementia and those caring for them with BoundaryCare. And also think about maybe being our next guest. We like to hear from everyone, from those diagnosed, those caring for them, researchers, businesses, authors, you name it. And again, just reach out to me or call in today at 323-870-4602. Again, that's 323-870-4602. I like to do all of our housekeeping up front, so I'm going to do a few shout-outs, and then we'll get to the meat of our program here, and we won't be interrupted. So I want to give a shout-out to Dementia Map. If you haven't checked that out, please do so. That has actually been a dream of mine for almost 40 years. We have 150 categories that you can search. There's a calendar of events, many of which are free. There's a blog, a glossary, and so much more. People have just been kind of flabbergasted at the resources that they didn't know about. So just go to dementiamap.com, and if you're interested in getting your resources in there, you can do that. We have a free profile. We also have two enhanced that you can benefit from as well. I want to mention Maud's Ventures. For any of you that are dreaming up new things that you want to launch, Maud's Venture is actually giving seed money to 3 different categories, from $50,000 to $100,000 for each category. So check out maudsventures.org, and the application process is really simple, and they're willing to sit down and talk with you about that process if you're not sure if you're a good fit or not. Super easy to deal with. So go to maudsventures.org. For those of you that are looking to connect, the Memory Camp is back on, and that is at Moon Beach in Wisconsin, August 15th to the 18th, and that is for people with dementia and their families. They have just a ball, and just getting to know others and being able to go canoe and sing and hike, and just have a really good time. So you can register or go learn more about that by calling 715-479-85. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. It's 715-479-8255. 715-479-8255 for the memory camp at Moon Beach in Wisconsin. I know a lot of people are always looking for support, and I do a couple of different support groups. One is Arthur's Memory Cafe, which we do online the second and the fourth Wednesday of each month at 1 o'clock Central, so that would be 2 o'clock Eastern, noon Mountain Time, and 11 a.m. Pacific Time. Anyone is welcome to join. People with dementia and their care partners. Both are present at those meetings. And then also, if you are in Minnesota, I partner with Brookdale North Oaks and the Shoreview Community Center, and we do a Caregiver Connect the last Wednesday of each month at 10 a.m. Central. And we do that at the community center in Shoreview. Anyone is welcome, and there is a respite for people with dementia. So the caregivers meet, and the people with dementia, if they're in early to mid stages. And you can register at 763-913-6140. We are going to hear from the Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner as they talk about the foot bar walker, and then we're going to be right back and get into this great discussion with the founders of BoundaryCare.
I love the foot bar walker, and let me tell you why. It is the option for my toolbox that I've been waiting for. Let's be honest. There are some clients who, despite our best rehab efforts, just aren't able to return to performing a sit-to-stand transfer on their own. Now I can offer my caregivers an easier, safer option that doesn't involve hoisting their loved one up from a sitting position. I don't recommend this walker for all of my clients, but I do recommend this walker for those caregivers looking for an easier, safer option with transfers. I would also encourage other therapists to add this walker to their toolbox. It's kind of like having my own mobile parallel bars for the client to pull up on. Whether it's a family caregiver at home helping a loved one with Parkinson's or dementia, CNAs in a long-term care facility assisting their patients, or therapists adapting to client and caregiver-specific needs, we now have a very safe and effective option to offer in the foot bar walker. Check this product out at thefootbarwalker.com. That's it for today from Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner. Have a great day, and don't forget, if you can't do it, adapt it.
I love both of those companies, so please go check them out. They're doing wonderful work. Now, we're going to talk to the founders of BoundaryCare, who are putting safety first when it comes to dementia and autism and so many other things. So let me go ahead and introduce this father and son team, and then we will talk with them. So today we're going to be talking with Scott and Paul Carpenter, who founded BoundaryCare. Scott is actually a professor at Carleton College here in Minnesota, and his son Paul is a software engineer. And right now he's located, it sounds like, in New York, but has done a lot of overseas as well. When Scott's wife, who is also, of course, Paul's mom, was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease, everything changed, and they knew there were other families like them that needed support. And that's how BoundaryCare was born and is now helping tons of families dealing with dementia. So welcome, Scott. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having us on, Lori.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you. And Paul, welcome to the show. I'm glad you could make it as well.
Hi, Lori. Yeah, it's very good to be here. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to start out by having you both talk about how you've been touched. You know, I mentioned, Scott, that your wife had dementia, and Paul, that's your mom. But I'm interested, and I always ask all my guests the same question, if you're willing to share a little bit more of that story, and have you, in your own family or circle of friends, have there been other people, too, that you've been touched by with dementia? And I'm going to throw it to you first, Scott.
Yeah. So, wow, how much time do we have? You know, when you ask that question of people, it's just amazing how many people are affected in a number of ways, right? And it's close contacts, and it's sometimes more remote contacts. But as we all know, dementia is everywhere, and so at some point or another, we're all going to be touched. As you mentioned, it was my wife, Paul's mom, who was diagnosed in 2014 with early onset. But that same year, my own brother was diagnosed with a form of dementia. It remained rather hard to pin down exactly what form it was. So it was kind of a double whammy. This after we also watched my mother-in-law go through dementia, Alzheimer's late in her life, and then my father-in-law deal with Lewy body dementia. So, touched in many different ways and had a lot of exposure to it and did not expect it to hit me so directly through my own family so early, I have to say.
Mm-hmm. That is a lot of connections, and it's interesting because lately the people I've been asking have had multiple touch points within their own family, which was something we weren't hearing quite as often. Paul, how about you? How has this whole experience been for you?
Well, for me, it's everything that my father just mentioned is all in the family, and so I was obviously very present and affected by it as well. I think that when I was young and when I was growing up, we were very lucky not to have too many medical problems in our family. It wasn't something that I had a direct connection to, so it was my grandfather's diagnosis and then decline that was my real experience with dementia, but also just with a loved one and a close family member really needing the sort of caregiving and the help that everybody going through this needs, and everybody going through so many other situations needs. So that was very marking for me, and I was in middle school at the time when that all started, and so it's been kind of a constant presence in my life ever since then, as these unfortunate diagnoses have rolled through our family, and as I sometimes see them in the parents or grandparents of friends as well.
Mm-hmm. Scott, are you comfortable sharing how old your wife was when she got diagnosed and where things are at this point?
Sure. Yeah, so my wife was diagnosed at 56, and she is now in very late stages of the disease. So it was actually during COVID that we had to make the very difficult decision to transfer her into a small facility. So she's currently in just a wonderful residential care home and getting great support, but with all of the, I guess I would say emotional trauma that comes along with that, right? That it's always difficult to make those kinds of decisions. So she's doing, all right, but we all know that this disease only goes in one direction despite various ups and downs.
Yep. Yeah. It is tough, and boy, that's young. That is young. My mom, started showing symptoms in her mid-50s, but she lived till 86, with her disease, and it just affects everybody so differently. Do you know specifically what type of dementia through testing that they gave you? I know a lot of times they're still saying, it really takes the autopsy to find out, and like with my mom, upon autopsy, it was Alzheimer's was primary, but then it showed Lewy body and showed Parkinson's as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for Anne, just because of the proteins that they found, they are pretty sure that it is Alzheimer's disease, so an early onset, but not a genetic strain. So there are strains where it will be, it's a done deal, right, that people are just going to get this. It's going to manifest at one point or another. So it is of unclear origin, really. There's no family history of this early dementia. And so it's been a real wake-up call for everybody. But, so early onset Alzheimer's is the diagnosis.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. Anything, Paul,
Sure.
you want to add to that at all?
No, I mean, I think it's, this is sort of the the family background, I guess you could say, that gave rise for why we decided to start BoundaryCare, because we were, we've been through caregiving multiple times at this point, and so it's something that we really believed in, and being able to help people out, and that would have helped ourselves if it had been there when we were going through our first round.
Mm-hmm. So when your mom was diagnosed, were you, because I know previously I believe you were working overseas and stuff, were you at home or had you left the nest? And
so when she was actually diagnosed, I had already left home. I'd finished college, and I was working. I think I was already in New York at that point, which is where I still am. So during the subsequent years, there've been I've tried to get back as much as I can and help out, and so my father was the main caregiver for years and years and years. So I also have a younger sister, and the two of us would come back to Minnesota when we could to obviously to see our mom and to spend time with her, but also to lend him a hand and to give him some time off and some respite when we could, because day-to-day caregiving is just an immense challenge, and even from afar we could tell the toll that it was taking.
Okay. Well, let's talk about BoundaryCare. Scott, do you mind sharing, how did you launch this? I mean, it's so interesting to me how many people are touched by this disease and then step in and say, you know what, we can do something a little bit better here.
Right. Yeah. Well, as they say, necessity is the mother of genius, right? And it's not the kind of thing that I had thought I would really be throwing myself into until fate pushed my hand a little bit and pushed me into this. So it was shortly after Anne's diagnosis that, after we got over the initial shock of it, that we started trying to think our way through the kind of resources that we would need just to chart a path through this. And as you might imagine, the resources are manifold, right? You need people, right? You just need friends and support, and you need emotional support, and you need material support, and you have to think about financing. And anybody who has been through this kind of trajectory with dementia knows the tremendous demands that it puts on a family in very material and emotional ways. But one of the things in particular that we were worried about was that because she was so young, which meant so I'm just a year younger than she is, I was working full time, and I needed to make sure that when I was away, I was able to keep tabs on her in a sense and just be reassured that she was all right. And so we began looking into the kinds of solutions that existed in the marketplace for monitoring health and location and well-being, and we're pretty surprised actually with the results. That it seems to be a field that has been slow to evolve and slow to catch up with some of the newer technologies. So we tried out a few of the solutions, didn't find them really to measure up to our needs, and then because I had some previous business background running a software company, and Paul, of course, is a software engineer with deep experience in iOS, the operating system for the iPhone. It occurred to us that we could maybe do something better, and we put that together with the Apple Watch, which is the premier device these days in terms of the number of sensors and the kinds of sensors that it offers, and thought that this would be maybe the way to start a new initiative. So that was the very beginning of it.
Okay. Anything that you would like to add to that, Paul?
I think we really tried to do our homework, and I'm sure as everybody else who goes to Dementia app or who's just sort of searching for resources on how to help, it's really it's a real challenge to find the combination of services and devices and technologies and tools that will just help you care for somebody in this specific case. Mm-hmm. And so I'd say that, the thing that we found when we were looking for a tool to, help prevent wandering and just generally keep my mother safe is that there were some other things out there, but they always just fell short in one way or another. There wasn't enough battery life, or it didn't work for multiple caregivers. And it's just, what we realized is that we really wanted something that could fit in to everybody's situation, because each person's caregiving and each person's caregiver circle is just so different and so unique.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I totally agree. It is hard, and you don't know the differences until you really jump in. I mean, everything looks good when you see it initially, and you think it'll be fine, and then you start actually testing it out, and you find things where it's just not as functional. Paul, why did you decide on the Apple Watch? I know Scott had said, really it's the most popular and stuff out there, but there are several others. Why was Apple so important to work with for you?
Yeah. Well, so like you mentioned, I have this background as a software engineer, and especially doing apps and mobile things. So I have a lot of experience working with different mobile platforms, and so when we started thinking, what can we use that's already out there to give us the peace of mind that we're looking for. We sort of looked at the slew of choices, and the Apple Watch sort of emerged naturally just when we looked at the what it offered. So what was really important to us was just having a really strong technical foundation. We needed a smartwatch that would really, truly last all day, where the GPS and the cell network really did work, because that was what was important technologically. And without that, we couldn't do anything. So that was one big criterion. And the Apple Watch also has the best health sensors out there right now. So the best integrated heart rate monitor, fall detection. Some of the newer models have O2 monitoring. So it seemed, and these are very important, sort of secondary, but still very important tools to have when you're trying to keep somebody with dementia safe. Because when we looked it up, there were 4 times as many falls in dementia patients as in normal undiagnosed people of the same age. So it's just these risk factors that we want to be able to keep track of as well. And then the final reason too is just that the Apple Watch, everybody has one, and it's not stigmatizing. It's not one of these medical devices that you put on and that marks you out as being somebody who's vulnerable or being somebody who needs extra help. And especially for, our family and the people that we knew who were diagnosed with dementia, they didn't want to advertise that fact. So being able to have a tool that's discreet and that doesn't stand out as being a medical device, but still provides the tools that caregivers need and that can help keep them safe was really important to us.
Yeah, when you talk about the stigmatizing, I mean, some of them almost look like ankle bracelets on your wrist. They're so large, and it very unattractive in terms of looks. And I think that's such a huge important factor, that it does look normal and that others have this, but it has all these features. I was kind of shocked at, the number of falls people have with dementia compared to, the average bear out there. That was fascinating to hear the falls are that much greater, yet not surprising, because gait is one of the things that changes, as well as eyesight and depth prevention, all of that as well. So thank you for the insight on why again, Apple is just so well known, has a good reputation, and you don't have any of those battles as well. Scott, was there anything else you wanted to add in terms of why the Apple Watch?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Paul did a great job of describing the technical abilities of it, and maybe what I could add is just a quick overview of how the whole system actually operates, so that people can try to imagine it.
Okay.
What happens is that the loved one in question wears the Apple Watch, and that's really the last action that needs to be taken, right? So it's just the simple wearing of the watch. And what happens is that we then collect passively, quietly, information from the watch, which we send up to our servers, and we're able to determine which information is crucial. We parse it, and then we send it down to the caregivers, and the caregivers are able to view the information on an app on their iPhone or on another device if they have an Android device. We're about to release a web version for that. And so then in a glance, they can look down at a dashboard and see the status of their loved one. So they get a map showing the location. They get information about the device, if the Apple Watch is running low on power, for example. And then they get this health information, the kinds of things that Paul mentioned, that we can pick up the heart rate. We can tell if there is a low or a high heart rate event. We can detect heart rhythms. With certain Apple Watches, we can look at oxygen saturation levels, and then there is fall detection. And then if any kind of an emergency occurs, so for example, if the loved one were to stray outside of a predefined safe zone, so people might identify their home or their yard, for example, as a safe zone, if they go outside of that, then they'll receive a notification, or if a fall is suffered, they'll receive a notification. And then they can take emergency action. So you can launch emergency tracking to follow somebody second by second, just to watch every step that they take. You can call emergency services, or you can just call the Apple Watch directly to check on the well-being of your loved one. The Apple Watch has an auto answer feature, so that the loved one doesn't even need to fiddle with any buttons or anything to answer it. So it's all of the technical things that Paul described about the advantages of the Apple Watch that makes it possible, really, for us to put together this package of services.
Wow, that's nice that there's nothing that they have to do, with the watch itself. What, Scott, what are some of the other services that you guys have that other watches and devices don't have?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, Paul mentioned one of them, which is not really a credit to us, but a credit to Apple, which is that there's no social stigma attached to wearing the Apple Watch, and that's pretty huge, because social stigma has been identified as the single greatest obstacle to getting people to wear remote monitoring devices. But then, because what we're dealing with is an app, so it's just downloadable from the App Store, the Apple App Store. Download it, put it onto an iPhone. Then you can also move it onto the Apple Watch. And because it's an app, that means that we can also improve it over time. So we roll out regular updates and we add features, not the kind of thing that you get with a single-purpose custom-made device that sort of is what it is when it's delivered, and that's how it remains. It has this wonderful collection of sensors. And because of the way that we're able to look at information on the sensors, and even the family caregivers can look at this information through the dashboard, you can see how certain things might interact. So it's great to have fall detection, so it's good to get an alert when somebody falls, but because you can also see things like low heart rate or low oxygen saturation levels, if you see a kind of a trend there, and we know that low heart rate can lead to dizziness because they're getting less oxygen to the brain. Same thing with low O2 levels. So you can actually engage in some forms of fall prevention in those cases. You get kind of an early warning system built in. Another thing that we have is when we allow customers to create a safe zone. So a family member might draw a square, for example, around a yard. There are a couple of other devices out there that have a safe zone that shows up as a dot, or as a big circle. But we let you customize that to whatever shape you want. And we also have what we call safe itineraries, so that if the loved one is still able to, say, walk the dog around the block or go to the grocery store, things like that, you can actually map out the path that person takes. And then it's only if they stray significantly from that path that any kind of an alert is given. So you don't want, mom going to the grocery store and then ending up in St. Cloud or something if they're still driving. So we've got a number of things like that. And one of the greatest, I would say, is just the ability to have multiple caregivers sharing the same account. So we know that caregiving can be a lonely job, but it's usually not entirely solo, that people are taking turns. And it might not take a whole village to care for a person with dementia, but it usually takes at least a couple or three people. And in BoundaryCare, you can add additional members of the family. It's just part of the standard account. And then you can take turns. You can say, I'm off duty, and it's my sister's job this weekend, or, you pass things around. And I guess last of all, I'd say that long-term care policies, if people happen to have long-term care insurance, those policies already will cover a service like BoundaryCare. It's just part of the standard policy for most things. So we know that there's a lot of financial strain on people when they're dealing with a person who's suddenly pulled out of the workforce, or just the additional costs of caregiving. But in this way, there might be some support for people who already have some insurance.
Okay. Well, and that's huge, too, because a lot of times people take out these policies and they don't have a clue what is covered or what's not covered. So just hearing that spoken out loud is helpful in and of itself. Paul, is there anything your dad missed that you want to add?
Yeah, I think he covered a lot of bases. I'd just say that the ability to make these custom safe zones and to make them whatever shape you want, and to have them anywhere. You can be at a friend's house. It can be at a relative's house. It can, you can have as many as you need to really tailor it to what you're getting. And that's the feature that we hear from customers over and over again that's really valuable to them. And, the only other thing I'd add is going back to the Apple Watch as sort of the enabler of all of this. And, one concern that we heard every now and then was that people were wondering, it's like, geez, an Apple Watch, how much does that cost? It's probably got to be really expensive. And, it's true that it's not free, but the price for the watch that BoundaryCare is best at, which is just the basic watch that can support a cellular plan, is $329 retail, and it's often discounted. And a little hint, you can find refurbished watches with warranties and everything for even much less on eBay or other sites or whatever. So if cost is a concern, there's ways it's not too expensive just for the device, and it's really actually less expensive than many of the competitors.
Well, and when you're saying the 300, I mean that's really like $1 a day for a year to have all those added value features in. And I didn't know that there were coupons. How do you get a hold of coupons?
Well, you just gotta, I'm sure everybody's got their favorite deal site that they go to, but there are always little promotions here and there.
Okay, well that's good to know. I guess I'm not a coupon cutter. I probably should be, but I'm one of those where when I have cut them out and then I go to the store and then I forget I have them until I get back out to the car and go, oh dang, and it took me 45 minutes longer to buy all the stuff that matched the coupons, and then I didn't use them. So I'm not a good one to ask on those things at all. And I like the idea of the refurbished too, because that can make a huge difference for people. One thing I wanted to ask was, you talked about a lot of, the health monitoring items, and in the safety zones. I loved when you said, you can do multiples, and because that's huge, and you're able to save those and stuff, so it's easy when you're going to routine sites and things. But on the health monitoring, I don't think people always understand how that can really assist them. And I'm wondering, Scott, if you can dive into that a little bit more and maybe give us some examples that you've heard of from people in terms of why this is so critical. And maybe with Anne, you found this beneficial yourself.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the unfortunate thing in my personal story is that by the time we had developed the product, far enough that we could use it ourselves, Anne was no longer really needing it. So we were able to test it out at home. But it did give us a sense of the kinds of things that can happen. And what people often don't think about is the way in which dementia is related to other ills. So there are often these comorbidities that in a sense accompany it and sometimes contribute to it. So I mentioned how low heart rates can actually make people feel dizzy. It can also hamper cognition. And if people are suffering falls, that too. So the most common injury from a fall is a head injury. People fall and they knock their heads. That too is going to affect cognition. And one of the problems with trying to sort of keep tabs on the health and well-being of a person with dementia is that at some point they have difficulty with communicating exactly what their experience has been, and they have difficulty remembering it. So there I can bring in personal stories where I came home once and Anne had this big bruise on her arm. It's like, well, what happened? And she said, oh, no, nothing. I said, did you fall? No. And then I found out, so we had a health aide there, and the health aide, came around the corner and said, oh, yeah, no, she fell. So if we're not there to see these things, then we need something that can speak for on behalf of the person who's not able to remember and communicate these things herself or himself. So being able to track things like heart rate, heart rhythms, falls, oxygen saturation, those are really crucial items to track in sort of the inventory of health and wellness.
Which makes a lot of sense. My ex-husband took a fall, and it had exactly to do with that. He got up from his desk and just smacked his head, sliced it open. And, he was in the hospital for a few days with that because, and they had to adjust his medications, and it would have been nice to have been alerted to that before an accident for sure happened. Right. So people would be aware of that. I think those things are. And I think
the
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the other thing that happens there is that when you see that there have been falls that you might not otherwise know about, it means that you can take some early intervention, and maybe it's time to do kind of an OT assessment. Maybe it's time to look at whether or not rugs need to be removed if it's a tripping hazard. Maybe it's time to put a gate up at the stairwell. All of those kinds of things. So since we're not always present to see all of those events, if we're able to pick them up in another way, then it's helpful.
Yeah, well, and it's just a much calmer way than going into a crisis mode. Right. There's enough, cray going on in the world, and if we can control those pieces, that's a huge benefit. I think too, when you were talking about the wandering, everybody understands the risks, and yet I hear so many people say, "Oh, well, he doesn't wander. She's never wandered." Well, they don't until they do. That's part of this, and they're not going to say, "Hey, I'm gonna take off today." That's not how it works, So
that's right.
To be able to have that set up in the back end, just to be able to sleep easier as a family member, knowing that is there, and you're able to protect them, I think is just massively huge. And I'll give an example of a woman in our memory cafe. Her husband stopped driving, and he didn't drive for 6 years, and he chose to not drive himself. He knew, he was declining and everything was fine. Well, he was still living at home, and she was caring for him, and they had in-home help that came. And she said one morning he woke up like at 4 a.m. He's all dressed, and he was at the door, and his wife said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm waiting for our home care person." And she got him back to bed and said, "No, it's too early. She won't be here till 8." Well, she went back to sleep and apparently slept really hard. He got back up, got dressed, and took the keys. She never hid the keys. Everyone's like, "Well, why didn't you hide the keys?" And it's like, because he gave up driving himself. He knew. Mm-hmm. And that day he did not. And he ended up, they lived in Roseville. He was up like by Isanti. And he even ran out of gas. And the construction guys were so helpful. They gave him gas to get him on his way. And then he went down the road the wrong way on the freeway, and the police caught him, and they just turned him around. And, and he's panicking. He's gone like for almost 8 hours, not knowing anything other than he had the car. And she had not a clue that was ever going to happen. Wandering probably entered her mind way before taking the car, because, he gave that up on his own. So, again, with this disease, people, we just don't know until it's a problem. Even something like this would be really interesting. And I don't know if you've tested it in airports, but this would be, I think, a good thing to maybe do if you haven't, because I've heard that it's hard to track people in airport, just, all of the walls and things that are in there. But so many people get lost in an airport. They go in a bathroom, and the bathroom has 2 exits, and you're standing outside one and they walk out the other. And then all of a sudden they're sending somebody in to check on somebody, and they're not in there. And then they realize there's a second entrance to it. And boy, if that worked in airports, that would be a really another nice way to be able to promote this. And I would be more than glad to even hook you up with the Roseville group and the international group that's working on travel safety and education for TSA and things there. But yeah, it's very, very important to have that information and be able to, that's just going to help the police and everybody in terms of trying to find where they are and be able to do it in a much quicker way. I'm wondering, and I'm going to throw this one to Paul first, if that's okay. But have you gotten feedback, Paul, from customers in terms of usage? What they like, or maybe what they'd like to see added to it or done differently. Are you guys open to that kind of feedback?
Oh, yeah, we are absolutely open to it. So we do our best to keep in touch with our customers without being annoying, but we want to make sure that everything's working well, that if it does look like there's any sort of problem, like let's say the watch hasn't updated for, a little bit longer than usual, they get an email. We're always there to support and always looking for ways to help and to help it improve. So when we have sent out a couple of surveys and gotten feedback back, overwhelmingly people say that this helps reduce their caregiving burden. Like practically 100% of the people using BoundaryCare tell us that, yes, this helps us. And then we've also just really, really valuable stories from people who write into us to just let us know that this helped them find their loved one when they wandered, or this helped them, and even if it's not directly wandering, but we had one person whose loved one was going to stay with a relative for a weekend while she was going to take a much-earned weekend vacation. And she was able to do that and feel comfortable with it because while she was on vacation, she could just check on her phone and make sure that, her loved one was wearing the watch, that they were where they were supposed to be, that everything was normal. So that sort of peace of mind, and, even in ways that we didn't necessarily expect, has been really gratifying to hear. Mm-hmm. And, one thing that people are, that we've heard from a couple of people that we're excited to be working on too is, an additional feature of the Apple Watch, which is being able to help monitor exercise and steps and things like that. And, you don't want your loved one to be wandering without your knowledge, but so many studies have shown that at least getting some kind of exercise, at least moving the body around, does so much to help slow down the progression of the disease and help, both the people carrying the diagnosis and their caregivers stay in better spirits. Mm-hmm. So we're being able to add that to our slate of tools as well to help caregivers, just see and, is my loved one getting exercise? Did they go out on their walk today? Are we able to make sure that we're, taking care of that physical health side of things even better?
Wonderful. Anything you want to add to that, Scott?
Yeah, I think Paul covered a lot of it. I would say that notion, that phrase, peace of mind, that's the one that comes up again and again, and it was truly a full 100% of our survey respondents that said that BoundaryCare eased the burden of caregiving. So that's huge. The other thing I'd mention is that in our own customer surveys, the majority of people feel that BoundaryCare has helped them keep their loved one at home longer because they feel more comfortable and that they are able to track things and manage things better. And 2 out of 3 of those people have said that they think that BoundaryCare is helping them keep their loved one at home for a year or more. So that's a huge savings financially, of course,
yep.
But it's also even greater in terms of just the the emotional effect and impact that it has if you're able to keep your loved one with you, giving that kind of personalized family care that both parties prefer.
Well, it sure minimizes that $300 for an Apple Watch when you're saving that kind of money, for sure. And like you said, it allows the relationship to continue and let them live their best lives together. I think the other thing that I really like about BoundaryCare is the team approach, because I think back to my mom, and everything pretty much fell on me, which was fine. I was fine to be part of that. I think if we would have had something like BoundaryCare where my brothers could have checked in and seen something, maybe it would have pulled them in a little bit more, because they were kind of aloof in terms of being involved, in her life, or even my dad with his brain cancer. And I think that being part of a team and part of a system that was, just automated, so it doesn't really work for anybody to do, would have been helpful. And maybe I'm wrong, but I really do think that would have made a difference in terms of their involvement in understanding really what's going on too, because so often I got, well, they look fine. They were fine when I visited, and it's just like when they're seeing, the kind of the insides of what's going on with the blood pressure and the heart rates and all of those types of things, and understanding that it can increase falls and, the wandering protection in and of itself. I just think it's really, really wise there. I can't believe we've only got about 10 minutes left. The time always flies on these shows. Is there anything, Scott, that we haven't discussed that we should?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would mention is that, because BoundaryCare is founded by this father and son team, and almost everybody who works on the project has a history of caregiving, we're pretty aware of what the challenges are. So we try to be attentive to the needs of customers. As Paul said, we're always eager for suggestions about how to improve the product. But it's also important for us to make sure that we're guiding people through the decision making process about, if should I get this kind of watch or that kind of watch. So we try to be very active in support, and we also know that tech is sometimes challenging. Not everybody's that familiar with the Apple Watch, so we offer phone support and are happy to coach people through the various steps, all the way from downloading it onto their phone, getting it onto the watch, setting things up, and we get them off and going. It doesn't take very long. So, we're doing the best we can to offer the best possible service.
Wonderful. And I think it's, when I purchase a product and I know somebody really understands the back end, of why this is a need, to me that makes a huge difference, because that lived experience is so valuable in terms of formulating and really developing a product out to meet the needs. So I thank you for that. Paul, anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I think that the whole experience for me has been humbling in many ways as we've been putting this together. But one of them has been this feeling of feeling like we're trying to help to solve a problem that so many people are going through, and that looks so similar when you're looking at it from a bird's eye, but is ultimately just so unique to each family and to each person and to everything that they're going through and who they are and what their situation is. So, and particularly, I would say even gratifying for me personally has just been hearing the ways that this has been able to help people, that BoundaryCare has been able to help people in ways that I wouldn't even have expected or imagined necessarily for myself or for our case, because everybody's situation is different. And I'd say that's been part of why we started this in the first place, because there's nothing there that really matched us. And that's been our goal going forward, is to make something as, flexible as it can be, to make sure that nobody's left out in the cold.
Well, that's wonderful. One thing I do want to mention is I would think that this would be an ideal thing for people with autism, developmental disabilities, even probably some people with mental health issues. I just think there's so many. Plus, again, just the norm of people out there using this. But health issues and wandering can come into play at all ages and stages of life, in all types of people. Scott, would you say that is true, that you see others using this, or have you been pretty much just marketing it to the dementia world?
No, you're absolutely right, Lori, that these kinds of problems that we're dealing with in the dementia world are not exclusive to that area. So we do have customers who are using BoundaryCare to help watch over autistic children, for example. And then, so mostly what we've been talking about today is the kinds of services that we offer to individual families, but we're also working with larger groups. So for people in the disabilities sphere who are managing group homes, we work with groups like that. We're also doing a large rollout with a provider in Ohio that is focused on the intellectually and developmentally disabled. And in those kinds of situations, we're also able to save some of the anonymized data, so de-identified data. We're not trying to track anybody, but to help to understand better what sorts of trends we can see, to help to be a little bit more predictive and be able to intervene in a more timely fashion for people. So you're right that there are actually many applications for this, although our original inspiration was really from our personal story, which was focused on the experience of dementia patients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have so much in common with so many others, and to see that kind of unfold, I mean, that just makes it even more normalized too. as things spread about. So kudos to both of you for the work that you've done with BoundaryCare in terms of helping so many out there. I would encourage our audience to like, click, and share this, because maybe you don't need it for yourself, but chances are you know somebody who this could really, really help. And you can go to their website, BoundaryCare.com, or you can email them at info@BoundaryCare.com. And, of course, you can always search for the BoundaryCare app on the Apple App Store for iPhones and or the Apple Watch as well. So thank you, too, for sharing your time with us here at Alzheimer Speaks. I really appreciate it very much.
Thanks so much, Lori. It was a delight to speak with you.
Great. You guys have a wonderful Memorial weekend. And to our audience, I hope you enjoy the long weekend and have fun and be safe and stay out of any crazy weather. I know we've had a lot of it lately. I do want to just do a couple more shout-outs. One is to Saltbox TV. If you haven't checked that out, Saltbox is a free online streaming service that was designed specifically for seniors. And, of course, you can always check out Dementia Map for more resources there. And last, I just want to mention that Alzheimer Speaks, we're going to be updating our website here shortly, so it'll be really kind of fun and easy to access. I have a whole page just dedicated to all the free services and educational tools and platforms and movements that you'll be able to access really, really easy. So enjoy, everyone. Thank you for listening. And again, please feel free to subscribe to the show. Bye now.
Hi, I'm Lori LeBay, and I wanted to tell you about Alzheimer Speaks, which is another great podcast. You see, my own mother lived with dementia for 30 years, and I felt lost. Did you know every 3 seconds someone in the world is being diagnosed with dementia? Odds are it's going to hit your families too. We want to help you connect to services, products, tools, research, and stories so you can be prepared. Please subscribe to Alzheimer Speaks on your favorite podcast platform.